You know, when you picture Abraham Lincoln, a very specific image probably comes to mind, right? The humble man from a log cabin, the great emancipator, the stoic president who saved the Union. He's this giant in American history, a figure we feel like we know inside and out.
But what if that whole story, the one we all know, is missing the most revolutionary part? What if, in the process of saving the Union, Lincoln didn't just preserve it? What if he fundamentally remade it into something entirely new? Okay, let's really get into this. So you have to understand that before the Civil War, the whole idea of the United States was, well, different. It was often talked about in the plural, like the United States are. It was seen as a collection of sovereign states, joined together in a kind of compact, not as one single, indivisible nation.
And this right here, this really gets to the heart of the conflict. Before the war, the big idea was that the states held the ultimate power. They got to decide who was a citizen and what rights people had. The federal government, its authority was seen as limited, something delegated by the states. And under this way of thinking, if a state felt like that compact was broken, well, leaving the Union, secession, was considered a totally legitimate option.
Well, that whole delicate balance just shattered in 1860. When Abraham Lincoln got elected on a platform that opposed the expansion of slavery, Southern states saw it as a complete existential threat. They were terrified that a powerful president, with the backing of the people, would just trample all over their sovereignty. So South Carolina was out, and 6 other states followed right behind them, creating this massive constitutional crisis with no clear answer. So how did Lincoln respond to this? Well, his response went way beyond what a traditional president would do. He started acting less like just a commander-in-chief and more like a political innovator, really testing the absolute limits of his office to create a whole new reality. And just look at this timeline. You can see how every step was an escalation. The start of the war, that was him just refusing to accept secession. But then, the Emancipation Proclamation in 1862, that was something completely different. It was a move that started to redefine what the war was even about, and that led directly to his re-election in '64, which he basically treated as a public vote on ending slavery for good.
There's a really key idea that helps explain what Lincoln was doing: unconventional adaptation. This is basically when a leader, in the middle of a huge crisis, stretches the existing rules, not to break them, but to build a whole new political foundation. And his most famous action is the perfect example of this.
Now, here's what's so fascinating. On paper, legally speaking, the Emancipation Proclamation was actually kind of weak. It only applied to territories that were in rebellion, places where the Union had no real power to enforce it anyway. But its symbolic power, it was immense. It single-handedly changed the entire meaning of the conflict. The war wasn't just about holding states together anymore, it was now a moral crusade for human freedom.
So this huge symbolic act totally set the stage for a permanent constitutional change. But for that to happen, Lincoln needed more than just his own presidential power. He needed a clear, undeniable mandate, and he needed it to come directly from the American people.
And this brings us to another really critical concept, the constitutional moment. This isn't just your average election. It's a time when the public gets so involved in a huge debate that the election's result is seen as a direct order from we the people to completely change the rules of the game.
For Lincoln, that moment was the 1864 presidential election. He and the Republicans basically framed the vote as a super clear choice. Re-elect me and we'll pass an amendment to abolish slavery forever, or we can choose a different path. The nation itself was being asked to decide, and whatever they chose was going to be binding.
And this quote just brilliantly illustrates what happened. Lincoln won a huge victory, and the effect was immediate. This quote, it's from a political opponent who, after the election, completely flipped his vote to support the 13th Amendment. And why? Because in his eyes, it wasn't just a political issue anymore. It was a popular decree, a direct command from the people.
So, okay, let's put all the pieces together. You can really see the 3-step process for how the nation was remade. First, Lincoln takes that unconventional, symbolic step with the Emancipation Proclamation. Second, he takes that new idea to the people and wins a clear mandate in the 1864 election. And third, armed with that mandate, Congress passes the 13th Amendment, making the change permanent and constitutional.
And the result of all of this, the war, the politics, that mandate, it was about so much more than just ending slavery. It was a fundamental shift in the very concept of what the United States even was.
You want to know how big this change was? It's perfectly captured by a tiny shift in grammar. Seriously, before the war, it was totally common to say the United States are a republic. treating it like a plural collection of states. But after the war, that changed. People started saying the United States is a republic, a singular, unified nation. So ultimately, that's the real story. Lincoln didn't just preserve the old Union of States, he oversaw the creation of a brand new one. Through a brutal war and some incredibly audacious political moves, the old idea of a loose group of states was defeated. It was replaced by the ideal of a single, indivisible nation with a powerful central government acting for all its people.
And that leaves us with one final question. This whole transformation, it settled the debate for its time, but that tension, that pull between state sovereignty and federal power, it never really went away. So how do you see the echoes of Lincoln's remade nation in the political debates that we're all having right now?